Hey guys and gals, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk Attack on Titan episode, I believe it was 36. Apologies for being away from Attack on Titan for a while. If you follow the channel, you know it was a fairly busy time, and then I came back, and it's just, this week it worked out for me to be able to talk about the episode, although it is very late comparatively to where the episode usually comes out. But anyway, let's talk about Attack on Titan. We started off the episode with Eren being taken away by Bertholdt and Reiner while he's in Titan form, and we ended off the episode pretty much with Eren being rescued. So overall, it's a pretty good episode, at least when it comes to progression and the fact that yeah, we got Eren, he's back. Well, not really back, but he's in good hands. And so when you're like sitting down to watch this episode, there's really three statements that you could come out of this episode with. The first one, Mikasa is crazy. She had a lot of shots in this episode that specifically made it kind of questionable how sane she is. And really props to the art department for that one. She looks terrifying. I legitimately felt bad for Bertholdt a few times. Just the idea of looking through the cracks of your friend's hand and seeing this crazy lady staring at you. But anyway, Mikasa, whatever. Next statement. Erwin is committed. The man had his arm chomped off by a Titan, continued the assault, and then showed up at the penultimate moment to help out. I mean, like, come on, like that was badass. He earned his keep. He earned his right to survive. And finally, Armin is an evil bastard. So what Armin ultimately did to freak Bertholdt out, you know, that was worthwhile. And we ended off the episode at seeing the Titan that ate Eren's mom at the end. So guys, overall, you know, it's a pretty fun episode, and really this episode, it's the characters. The characters are the ones that are winning out here. I mean, like, if you look at the shots in this episode, and just the shots for Armin and Mikasa in particular are just very impressive. So impressive. Like it is kind of scary just to see it happening. Erwin also, he gets a pretty good time. Now speaking of art, actually, and specifically talking about the production value for this episode, if you looked at this episode, quite a bit of it were just still sequences. So especially when you're seeing those close-up of the faces, you know, that is pretty much the studio cutting corners. But thankfully, because they usually do such great art pieces in general, the cutting corner isn't as blatant or as jarring as it would be, like, say, with the One Piece anime. So for this one, you know, this studio is usually pretty good at making still shots and making, you know, relatively less complex animation type shots look really good. So for technicality of the episode, because this episode does end up being a bit of a talker episode, because we have Ymir and Krista or Historia doing their thing and talking it out, and then you have the whole sequence with people trying to talk to Bertholdt. You know, all those sequences are relatively less animated, and then when you have those action pieces, like any part that involves Erwin or Mikasa doing something, it really ramps up. And so what ends up happening is, at least in my experience, the episode ends off being pretty consistent in a pacing when it's just talking, and then all of a sudden you get that high octane dose of action, and then you go back to talking for a while. And overall, you know, I think it works because this is a relatively tense moment that you kind of want that reprieve when the characters are just talking to each other, and you, well, it's Attack on Titan, so you still want to get that high octane, just to remind yourself of the generally bad situation that the characters are in. Overall, it's a very entertaining episode to watch. Now, if we were to talk about things that are of value in this particular episode, well, you know, the characters are ultimately the ones that are really shining here. With Mikasa, well, actually, Mikasa doesn't really shine besides what she usually shines for. I mean, Mikasa is generally a very competent character when it comes to destroying things. If anything, the thing that really pops out for the character in this particular sequence is just how far she's willing to go for Eren, or just how compromised she seems to become when it becomes about Eren. But really, the ones that are really standing out in this episode are probably Armin, Erwin, and Bertholdt. Bertholdt especially, because he starts talking in this episode and he talks about the guilt that he kind of feels. He talks about how no one would like to see, or no, there's no person in the world that would like to do what those guys had to do. And so, you know, it just introduces a very interesting little dynamic, and it's actually, how would I say it? It's actually really nice that Berthold just kind of broke down and talked to them like this, because it justifies Reiner's problems. It justifies that Reiner's not the only one going through this extreme stress. It's just that Berthold is doing a better job at managing it. Because what he ultimately ends up saying is kind of the same things that are along the lines of what Reiner was saying. It's just Berthold isn't as far gone as Reiner was, to the point that Reiner was getting confused whenever he was actually talking about it. So I really appreciated that. I really liked that Berthold, for those split seconds, just kind of talked to them and broke down. Because again, the guy is human, right? Like, you'd expect the guy to have some kind of stress about the fact that he just murdered all his friends. Or, well, you know what? They're actually his friends. Like, they realistically, during the time he was a soldier, they are the soldier's friends. But, you know, it was good to see him break down. And then, kind of in combination with Berthold, you have Armin, who is picking on what he identified would be Berthold's kind of like sore spot, and that was specifically Annie. And when he's talking about the torture that she might be going through, you know, just good on Armin, because he also looks very desperate when he's doing that little maneuver. And again, it just paints the situation is a really nasty situation. Beyond that, you have Erwin, and Erwin's just doing all kinds of tactics to make sure he can get Eren back. And, you know, ultimately, it just makes you respect the guy. Like, the guy's pretty blatant about saying, like, guys, yeah, we're gonna sacrifice you because this is a bigger deal than all of us. And I think the part that really kind of just justifies this, or the thing that really speaks to Erwin as being a really good character, is that when he gets chomped away by that Titan, he's still saying move forward. Like, he's not specifically a commander who would go and hide behind a desk. No, he's a commander that will most likely die with you. And that's ultimately why probably the scouts are okay going into what they think is a losing battle. And just in general, his tactics with just trying to weaponize roaming Titans to try and stop the runaway Titans, you know, that's full of respect. And like, whenever everyone's saying like, guys, get out of there, Erwin's doing crazy stuff, you know, it just makes, it's ultimately a very fun sequence. I mean, like, yeah, it's pretty desperate, it's pretty ballsy, it's pretty crazy, but man, I'm gonna love watching it unfold. And I think like, just this episode is doing a really good job at demonstrating a lot of the characters in either interesting or their very best moments. And at the end of the day, how could you not appreciate that? And then, like, on a slightly more I don't really know how to describe this, on a slightly more just kind of their point, you know, Historia and Ymir keep having their thing. At this point, you know, when you have the episode and you have all these other awesome dialogues that are happening, and they're in company with like generally great art, you have Krista and you have Ymir, and you know, their conversations are about, I don't know, they're kind of continuing along the same lines. They're just reiterating things that we already know. Historia's reiterating that she's always going to be there for Ymir. Ymir's like trying to like just say that she's a bad person, and Krista's still got her back. You know, they're just reaffirming that, and it's really happening because at the end, Historia gets pulled away from Ymir. So, you know, you have that sequence, and it is pretty interesting what Ymir's ultimately saying, that she's going to die, or that she needs Reiner and Berthold with her. You know, like, her plight is justifiable. I just think in comparison to what all the other characters are doing, that particular set of dialogues isn't as impressive. But that might just be me. That might just be me personally. I might just be a bit jaded because we've been focusing with Ymir and Krista for a while. And then when you have all the other characters popping up now, it's just a much more interesting affair with those characters. But, you know, still, worthwhile things. They're just trying to justify what Ymir is doing and why she's working with the two runaway Titans. And really, I think the most interesting part of the Ymir kind of angle of this is just Berthold saying things like, was this actually worth it, Ymir? Like, we're in a lot of trouble. It's just his desperation, right? Again, like, all the other characters are accentuating the situation, and the Ymir thing is just kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, that's just my personal thoughts. Now, next week, we're most likely heading into Trauma Central because we got to see the Titan that ate Eren's mom at the end. So who knows what's going to happen, but if anything, this was a really pretty episode. The characters, I think, had a pretty good time, a pretty good round in this particular episode, and I'm excited to see where or just what exactly is going to unfold in next week's episode. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below if you have any thoughts. Let me know if you really liked this episode, and let's end it there. Till next time, I hope you have a great day.